The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have now learned that the shooter in yesterday's Navy Yard mass shooting was Aaron Alexis, 34 years old. He has been named as the armed gunman who opened fire at the Washington Navy Yard, killing 12 and injuring up to 15 more. Those are the latest numbers I have. He's reported to have used an AR-15 assault rifle, not surprising at all. He was also armed with a shotgun and handgun. SWAT teams fought what was, I guess, being described as a heavy gun battle and eventually did shoot him dead. Alexis had served in the U.S. Navy for almost 4 years before he was discharged in 2011 for misconduct. He had been awarded 2 medals during his military service, Lewis, and it's been reported he was kicked out of the Navy because of an arrest for discharging his own gun in 2010, and there was a similar incident of a discharge of his firearm in 2004. After this initial police briefing yesterday, where it was indicated that there were 2 other persons of interest they were looking for, the FBI is now reporting that Alexis was the only shooter. They are looking for another person who is just a person of interest, but they don't believe that there were any other shooters. All of the 15 people wounded, so we've got the 12 casualties. Of the 15 wounded, all are in critical condition, but presumably, hopefully, will survive. President Obama said he will hold those responsible who carried out what he is describing as a cowardly mass shooting. He called the victims patriots. There's a report that his father said that Aaron Alexis had anger issues and that they went back to his time in New York City, where he helped in the rescue efforts following the September 11th terrorist attacks. And the shooter's father also told police that his son had experienced anger management problems that the family believed to be associated with PTSD. He did have a secret clearance, Lewis. He was assigned to start working at the Navy Yard in question as a civilian contractor with a military-issued ID card, according to his firm's chief executive and what they said to Reuters. Was the background check so superficial, Lewis, that they didn't realize he had this past, or did they? And this doesn't disqualify you from having a secret clearance? I ask that rhetorically. I know that this type of record, these 2 incidents with the guns, would disqualify you, presumably, from having a secret clearance. What do you think went wrong here?
Hard to say. I mean, I guess maybe it depends on the clearance. This could have just been a low security clearance, maybe not on a high level. So I think in that case, maybe the firearm discharge thing might have slipped through. And I mean, the PTSD thing, well, he wasn't officially diagnosed with that, right?
No, and we're going to talk about that. That's the next thing I want to talk about. But before we get to that, the gun enthusiasts, I'm told it's not polite to say the gun nuts. The gun enthusiasts are saying right away, this incident has nothing to do with guns, which I think is completely absurd. We can have conversations about many aspects of firearms usage, but to say that the incident has nothing to do with guns is downright idiotic, and it makes no sense, and it is a complete distraction. But what I am realizing is that there will never be a mass shooting that is horrific enough, lethal enough, or tragic enough to curb this insatiable appetite for firearms that exists in certain areas of the country. Because, Lewis, we've had many children killed at Sandy Hook. We've had this incident on a military facility. We've had individual handgun shootings in places all over the country. It doesn't matter what the configuration is. There will never be anything that will change the view that these incidents only prove that we need even more guns. In fact, these types of incidents, not only do they bring up discussions of gun control, but they serve to activate those who are so afraid anytime a gun is used in the commission of a crime that their guns will be taken away, that it creates even more deadlock. And I just don't see the insatiable appetite for guns changing in any way except getting stronger.
Right. I mean, is it that they actually care about the Second Amendment and their interpretation of it? Or are these just people who are terrified that they're going to lose their precious guns?
No question about it. It is the latter. And by the way, In addition to all the discussion about guns that's completely just bogus on social media and blogs and all over the place, the naivete and arrogance of all of these individuals who think that they know how to properly secure naval bases. People all of a sudden are experts in anything. Around the time of the Obamacare Supreme Court decision, everybody was a constitutional expert. Now everybody, people who have never even been on a naval yard, on a naval base at a naval yard, are experts in securing naval bases. Social media is a fascinating thing.
It's excellent, Dave. It's an excellent thing. It's one of the most incredible advancements we've ever made. Unfortunately, it's a two-way street. It's also one of the most horrific outlets for people who we're talking about here.
A double-edged sword. So Lewis alluded earlier to the second tragedy here. We have the primary tragedy at the Navy Yard, which is the fact that 12 people died, 15 people were injured. It was a just a terrifying and horrible scene, and everything that comes with it, and the gun discussions. That's part one. Part two is the mental health for veterans issue, which Lewis alluded to. U.S. law enforcement officials are telling the AP that the Navy contractor identified as the gunman, 34-year-old Aaron Alexis, had been suffering a host of serious mental issues, including paranoia, including a sleep disorder. He had been hearing voices in his head, and he had been treated since August by the Veterans Administration for his mental problems, according to the official, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because the criminal investigation was continuing. The Navy, as Lewis mentioned, had not declared him mentally unfit, which would have rescinded that security clearance that he had from his earlier time in the Navy Reserves. This story, we can look at the kind of specifics and the failures, but I really hope that this incident will bring to light something that I've been talking about and Lewis has been talking about for years, which is for all of the so-called patriotic support the troops stuff, which involves putting stickers and ribbons on your car. What about supporting the troops by not sending them into pointless wars in the first place? But what about providing adequate medical care when they come back and are suffering from PTSD and all sorts of other conditions? And broadly speaking, let's figure out why we can't support the troops after they serve. And I know, Lewis, that this specific example doesn't check off all the boxes that I'm describing. In this particular case, it appears to have been PTSD brought on by Alexis's involvement rescuing victims at Ground Zero and 9/11, and there are other factors. But this is the opportunity to talk about healthcare for veterans, which is just such a huge problem. We're getting votes to not fund veterans' healthcare properly. It's a disaster, and if nothing else, I hope there's a serious discussion about it after this incident.
I hope so. But still, even if he had the best care possible, there's no saying that he might not have just, instead of going to where he had his security clearance and shooting the place up, that he would have gone to a mall and done it. But apart from that, you're right. This is a huge problem. And just ask any Republican, David. It's really just much cheaper to buy a little bumper sticker.
Of absolutely no surprise to anyone who's been paying attention to the litany of conspiracy theories that happen after every single one of these types of attacks that we've been talking about. Just minutes after the Navy Yard shooting yesterday, the conspiracy theories started. Was it a false flag attack, Lewis? Was this a planned attack to distract from who knows what that President Obama was doing? Well, Alex Jones certainly thinks so. Let's listen to just a little bit of his show yesterday. Here's his idea, his hypothesis, Lewis. Let's take a listen.
8 injured. There were 3 shooters. Now we're told there's 2. At the big naval yard in Washington, D.C., where no one is allowed to have firearms to protect themselves. Noticed almost all of these mass shootings happen in victim disarmament zones.
Right.
Now, my gut will tell me this will probably end up being a couple of, quote, jihadis. But even if they are jihadis, they will somehow go through their home computers, and if they find them visiting ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News, that won't be on the news.
Right. Well, this continued. I don't need to play the whole thing. You know how it goes. It's a false flag. It turned out that it doesn't seem like these were jihadis. It seems like it was one individual. It seems like it was an individual who was rescuing people at Ground Zero 9/11. It seems like an individual who had certainly some sort of a career going here, and not what Alex Jones is describing as the normal patsies in the false flag attacks. This was not Alex Jones alone. On any number of conspiracy message boards and forums, there have been people already starting to cobble together YouTube videos pointing out people that are actors, someone that was laughing on scene. People wouldn't be laughing, of course, Lewis. It's amazing to me that with the number of false flag planned attacks that there are in this country, they never get it right. One of the actors ends up having some expression on his face that doesn't make sense. They're laughing when they should be crying, or they're talking loudly when they should be talking softly. You would think they'd be able to just finally get the right actors for this thing, don't you think?
Right. After Sandy Hook, after all those actors were busted, you would think that now they would learn their lessons. And it's incredible that all of a sudden, wherever these actors are, 10 to 15 minutes after some horrible incident, somehow they magically appear there.
Yeah, well, no, they're there because they're ready. They know that the incident is going to be happening, Lewis. You're not thinking deeply enough about the conspiracy. We will do a point-by-point rebuttal if these longer, very kind of elaborate conspiracy theory videos start to pop up on YouTube. So let us know if there is one, and we will do a point-by-point analysis. And we're not dismissing it out of hand. We will analyze it, and we will see if there's something there, and then we will report to you. And of course, we will talk to you on the bonus show. Today's bonus show, we will talk about the Twitter IPO, xenophobia around Twitter ownership, and the inherent hypocrisy of that. We will also talk about New York burying people next to their pets if you want, or at least allowing it. Is that something you would want if you're a pet owner? DavidPakman.com/membership to sign up. But more importantly, for the next 3 days, you get your membership, a hoodie, and a bumper sticker. DavidPakman.com/fall13. You have to go to that website to get that deal. Check it out. You've got a couple minutes. We'll be back right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Do you know why patriots eat turkey on Thanksgiving? Is it because turkeys are evil, socialist, liberal birds that need to be eliminated? It just might be. Find out more at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Stephen Winter. Stephen Winter, thanks for being a David Pakman Show member. Could not do it without you. Join Stephen. Great membership special going on. davidpakman.com/fall13. Today in show history, 1 year ago today, Rick Santorum said that the Republican Party will never have the elite smart people on their side. And we said, let's explore that. That seems like an interesting statement to hear from someone like Rick Santorum. Of course, we haven't been hearing that much from Rick Santorum lately. 3 years ago today, Phil Davison, the Republican candidate for Stark County Treasurer in Ohio, gave one of the funniest campaign speeches in history. You remember this, Lewis. He give us some of the excerpts from it.
Well, he talked about the 5 or 6 degrees he's obtained. He keeps screaming, clearly very agitated. I don't know. It's one of the most bizarre and funny things I've ever seen. Everyone, if you haven't seen it, look it up. Phil Davison. Davison or Davidson? It's
Davison. Yeah, look it up and the song parodies. It's amazing that it's been 3 years since it happened because it feels like just yesterday I was hysterically laughing at those videos. And 4 years ago today, the Congressman Joe Wilson "You Lie" controversy. Remember when he yelled "You lie" during President Obama's State of the Union? We talked about that. And the controversy actually continued for quite some time, and there was like a follow-up controversy. Anyway, Congressman Joe Wilson 4 years ago. There's a Catholic group considered fringe even by many Catholics called Fix the Family, and they have this online website where they have instructional videos and articles about how to live a Catholic life and really how to live a life that is within what they define as the happy, faithful Catholic family. And they have an article about why women should not go to college. And they say in the article, listen, these aren't the reasons why. It's not because we don't believe in educating women. It's not because we want to oppress women. It's not because we want to turn women into subservient beings within the family system. It's not. Here are the reasons you shouldn't send your daughters to college. Number one, she will attract the wrong types of men. Number two, she will be in a near occasion of sin. You have a heavy concentration of young people all living together without the supervision of parents at the most sexually charged state of life they will experience. How could you expect that they would avoid these temptations even on a Catholic college campus? Right, because a Catholic campus is where there's the least sexual urge, right, Lewis? That makes perfect sense. Here's another reason why you shouldn't send your daughter to college. She will not learn to be a wife and mother. Nothing that is taught in a college curriculum is geared towards domestic homemaking. The cost of a degree is becoming more difficult to recoup. That's actually accurate. That one has nothing to do with Catholicism, but that one is actually accurate. And you don't have to prove anything to the world. Often the reason for a girl going to college is the pressure of the society around her, including her parents. The girl who graduates from high school along with her parents gets the endless barrage of questions, where are you going to college? And she will regret it. The more we talk about this prudent option for girls, the more we have women who are willing to admit they regret that they bought into this lie of having a dual career family where both the man and the woman work. This is, like I said, Lewis, from a super fringe element of the Catholic Church. I am not saying that this applies broadly to the Catholic Church, because there are countless Catholic high schools and universities, and even if you believe they are there in part to indoctrinate into Catholic teachings, they still are in favor of educating men and women alike. It is important to know that this element does exist, but I am by no means saying this applies to the broader Catholic Church.
No, it doesn't, but it's still obviously important to talk about. These groups exist. And it's funny, this is exactly what's happening in Saudi Arabia, for example. With
Absolutely.
Women. Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing. I have two more religious-related stories, and these are going to really be something else. Get ready for this. Cindy Jacobs is a self-described respected prophet. She has this online video series called 10-Minute Prayer School, and I'm going to play video where she recounts two amazing things she was a part of. Number one, she was able to heal her own vagina tumors simply by getting Jesus' help. And number two, she was able to heal a woman's broken cheekbone simply by getting Jesus' help. Take a look at this video. It's amazing.
This woman stood up. You could see she'd been in a car accident. She had that concave, to look to her cheek. And I said, reach up and feel it. And she did. And as she rubbed her hand over her cheek, when she moved it away, you could see God had grown the bone right under her hand. Praise the Lord. I once had a grapefruit-sized tumor in my body. And the Holy Spirit showed me the source of that, why it had come from a root of unforgiveness and a root of wounding. And in fact, it was near, behind my female organs or whatever. And the Lord showed me that Satan had wounded me as a woman. And so therefore, I was carrying that pain in my body until it grew into a tumor. So forgive.
How about that, Lewis? What is your reaction? I mean, she was just able to notice also how she doesn't call it her vagina, or maybe it was like her uterus. I don't know. She calls it like her female parts or something like that. This seems to top even Pat Robertson. This is at a very high level that this woman is operating at.
This is amazing. This is probably one of the most delusional people we've ever talked about on this program.
Yeah, this is an example of what happens when religious zealotry becomes completely divorced from any semblance of reality and gets intertwined inextricably with complete lunacy. That's what we've got here. That's the recipe. You can make a drink, for example, like you might have a drink that's like vodka and cranberry juice. This is religious zealotry holding the connection to reality and adding in absolute lunacy, shaken but not stirred. This is what you get.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, whatever planet this woman is on, it sounds like a really fascinating place. I'd like to check it out sometime.
It does. And then the latest from Pat Robertson, we learned last week or the week before that Pat Robertson has been collecting millions of dollars on the backs of a basically non-existent aid program involved with Africa. If you missed that story, check it out. Now we're back to the more traditional Pat Robertson story. He was actually asked about faith healing. He was asked about something his son said or did. I'll play the clip for you. And then he says it's basically just like Santa Claus, not Santa, Santa Claus. Take a look at this and listen to this.
This is Clark, Pat, who says, I watched your son and a woman on TV telling people that God was healing a certain condition that people in the audience were suffering from. Then they discussed cases where viewers had written in to say they had been healed, thus apparently proving that they have the ability to get God to heal people during the show. Is that power only available to them during the show? If not, are they spending every waking moment healing people? If not, that's just plain wrong.
I'll have to ask my son, why don't you just get on and walk through hospitals and heal people? If we had the power to heal anybody, then you should go through the hospital and clean out every ward and every room and heal everybody there. But that's not the case. So are you that woman on television that the man refers to?
I fear I might be.
All right.
You know, really, I think if someone has not experienced that before, it must be confusing. And, you know, leading this person to go back and read Corinthians, I think, is the appropriate thing.
Plural gifts of healing. And it's like Santa Claus. He's got a pack on his back and he has gifts and he's passing these gifts out.
Come on. If you even believe that the question is real, I think this has to be a fake question. Number one, he has to check with his son to make sure they're on the same page with the BS they're presenting you. He doesn't want to give you a slightly different line of BS than his son, Lewis, because then it might become apparent that they're complete scamsters.
Right, but in a way, he's correct. Faith healing is kind of like Santa Claus because neither one of them is real.
That's exactly right. I was thinking the God of the Bible is just like Santa Claus in many ways, and the most important way, I would say, is that they're both being used to keep people obeying the church, just like Santa is being used to keep people obeying their parents. I mean, in a way, he's right. Santa Claus, and I don't know why he calls it that, is very similar to faith healing.
Yeah, there are always interesting parallels to draw between these things that Pat Robertson says, strangely enough.
DonateYourAccount.com/David Pakman Show. Since I mentioned it last week, we've been slowly creeping up in the rankings on Donate Your Account. It's this very cool website where you can donate either or both a Twitter retweet, a Facebook share, or like I said, both. Doesn't cost anything. The David Pakman Show is running like 7th or 8th among all shows that are using Donate Your Account. If you go on and give us a free donation of one or both, you'll help us come up to the top. I think, Lewis, we should be able to break into the top 5, hopefully, by the end of September if people keep helping us out. So check that out. DonateYourAccount.com/David Pakman Show. We will take a break. Next, Lawrence Wilkerson. Remember when Colin Powell was Secretary of State and he made that case for war in Iraq? His chief of staff at the time was Lawrence Wilkerson, who will join me next to talk about making the case for Iraq and parallels with the case for action in Syria. Stay with us. Great interview coming up.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined by Lawrence Wilkerson. He's a visiting professor of government and public policy at the College of William and Mary. He also served as chief of staff to former Secretary of State Colin Powell, and he was responsible for a review of information from the CIA that was used to prepare Colin Powell for his February 2003 presentation to the UN Security Council during the run-up to the war in Iraq. Professor, it's really a pleasure to have you here. Since your role, as I described, in that position of chief of staff with Colin Powell, you have criticized the intelligence that was used to make that case that we are now all intimately familiar for the case for war in Iraq, and you're concerned now about the intelligence being used in Syria. Let's start there.
I'm concerned about intelligence from 2 points of view with regard to Syria, and they both relate back to the Iraq War and the occasions you've just described. The first concern I have is the intelligence what we're looking at? That is to say, have the intelligence professionals put forward their views, and are those views in an unadulterated way being presented to the American people and to their representatives in the Congress? That's the first concern. You might call it a concern about politicization of the intelligence. The second concern is with the intelligence itself. Any intelligence professional, and I've worked with them for over 40 years, will tell you that any good intelligence service is probably right or near right about 60% of the time. That's all you can expect. So that's a wide margin for error, 40% of the time. So those two concerns relate to Syria as much as they did to Iraq, with Iraq having been a really egregious case of politicians cherry picking the intelligence to make it fit their policy rather than taking all the intelligence and letting it inform their policy.
So to ask about Syria, let me ask a question about Iraq, and then we can kind of go from there. At the time that you were reviewing that information from the CIA that Secretary Powell eventually used to make the case for Iraq, were there candid discussions that you were involved in or privy to where the validity of the intelligence was being questioned, or was it after the fact that that came to light?
Both. There were some very dramatic moments in the preparation. We only had 5 days and nights out at Langley, the CIA headquarters, and then one day and a night in New York as we got ready to present to the Security Council. I remember three very dramatic moments. I'll relate a couple to you. Secretary Powell had taken me aside and put me into a room and closed the door in the National Intelligence Council spaces in the CIA headquarters. And he had said he was utterly disgusted with the information in his presentation about terrorism and about the connections between Baghdad with Al-Qaeda in particular. There didn't seem to be any. And I was very comfortable with that. I told him he didn't need to get angry with me. I'd be more than willing to take it out. Went right out and told his speechwriter, who was sitting in front of the computer actually preparing the preparation in terms of narrative, and told her to take it completely out. Everything about connections between Baghdad and essentially their secret police, their Mukhabarat, and Al-Qaeda. Within an hour, George Tenet dropped a bombshell in his conference room where we had reconvened to begin rehearsing again, and said that a high-level Al-Qaeda operative under interrogation had just revealed substantial contacts between the Mukhabarat and Al-Qaeda operatives, including training those operatives in how to use chemical and biological weapons. Well, this was a bombshell. And so we put that back into the presentation. There were dramatic moments like that about Saddam's active nuclear program with regard to the aluminum tubes and so forth, and other instances where we were very skeptical, even so skeptical as in the case of the mobile biological labs, for example, and also the one I just related to you about the terrorism context, that we actually moved to eliminate them from his presentation, only to have the DCI, George Tenet, accompanied by his deputy, John McLaughlin, give us some kind of dramatic story that compelled us to put it back in.
So based on that, then, we might have a situation now with the case being made for Syria where the information, the intelligence is being presented in good faith, and it might at some future point turn out to have been wrong. But based on the conversations you're describing, there may be a case being presented now with information that is known to be maybe not wrong, but certainly not strong. Is that a possibility?
I think it's fair to say that some of the information may be being presented as very, very strong because it fits the policy directive, it fits the policy objective. And in that case, you may be guilty of a little bit more sophisticated cherry picking, but it is cherry picking nonetheless. I do think, from what I've heard, inside the intelligence community, inside the Pentagon, from Beirut, from Damascus, where I have people who actually email me and talk to me about the civil war, I think chemical weapons have been used multiple times over the past 6 to 12 months. There have been small instances. Clearly, I think the 21 August use was the largest, or at least the largest reported incident. And the UN has now concluded its investigations, and there's a likelihood that someone within the government probably authorized, whether it was Assad or not, we do not know, probably authorized this use of chemical weapons. It's still ambiguous to the point where I wouldn't say with certitude that's the case, but I would say that I have a stronger feeling now after all these conversations with people inside and outside the intelligence community, and also with the reports coming from the UN team, that somehow, somewhere, the government probably was involved in this use of chemical weapons. Now, it might indeed have been a response to some of these other instances where the opposition was using chemical weapons, predominantly sarin or watered down sarin, I would say. So it's still ambiguous as to exactly what the tit for tat is in Syria with regard to chemical weapons use.
In the last couple of minutes we have, I want to take this conversation about the strength of intelligence that's used when these cases are made and kind of ask a different question. Back when you were involved in the discussions you talked about earlier, are we going to include the connection between Al-Qaeda and Saddam, or are we not, and these types of things? Were there ever moments where you stepped back, and I don't know if this includes Secretary Powell or not, and there's a kind of a candid conversation about what really might be at the root of wanting to make this case in the first place? Like, does the term military-industrial complex, or does oil, do any of these things come up candidly when you're sitting in those backroom meetings planning this case that will be made? Or is that kind of understood and not mentioned at all?
The latter is more often the case in my experience. I've served 3 presidents fairly closely. And let me go back to the first Gulf War, where I was special assistant to Colin Powell when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Yes, there was mention of oil, and yes, there was a putting down on the ground early on the 82nd Airborne troops to keep Saddam from turning right, as it were, and going into Saudi Arabia, where, for example, Ras Tanura, I think, was pumping 6 million barrels per day, one of the greatest production capacities in the world, of course, and we didn't want Saddam having control of that. But you don't hear that discussed really, even at the highest levels, as objectives, as reasons. It may come up, someone may nod, someone may blink, someone may nod his head as if, yes, I agree, and so forth. But it's clear that those are the reasons that you're doing what you're doing. Let's just face it, ever since Franklin Roosevelt and the king in Saudi Arabia talked, and Jimmy Carter laid down the gauntlet at the end of his administration and said that the Persian Gulf was a vital national interest to the United States of America, we have been using military force, diplomacy, and other means in that area to protect oil, period.
All right, we've been speaking with Professor Lawrence Wilkerson. He is a visiting professor of government and public policy at the College of William and Mary. Couldn't be more appreciative for your insight. I mean, this is really fascinating stuff, and I think our audience really enjoys hearing what these discussions are like behind the scenes. So I hope you'll join us again. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
You know, we often talk about Fox and Friends on this program, and we like to make fun of their silly little stories they do, the special interest stories with like a woman who smelled God or whatever the case may be. Those are stories that are concerning because they're part of the kind of mainstream television, cable news milieu, so to speak. However, they're not particularly damaging in an acute way, although in context, they all are quite damaging. I'm going to play a clip for you from Fox and Friends that is just literally incredibly damaging because of what's being said. Alex Epstein, who's the founder of the Center for Industrial Progress, went on Fox and Friends Saturday morning, and he literally brings a pet rock with him and he says that fracking is actually incredibly good for the environment. Check this out.
Yeah, my view is exactly the opposite. Fracking is actually incredibly good for our environment, and there's two reasons. One is that this rock right here, this exists 5,000 feet away from groundwater. So the last thing that's going to contaminate your groundwater is a fracking operation. But number two, look at the places in the world with the best environments. They're the places that use the most energy, because nature doesn't give us a clean environment. We have to clean it up. That takes a lot of energy to purify the water, to grow crops, to make the world a better place. And that's why I titled my book, Fossil Fuels Improve the Planet.
Yeah, this is like that argument, Lewis, that, hey, more carbon dioxide is good because plants breathe carbon dioxide. We like plants, right? Right, Lewis? I mean, this is just the most, this is what happens when people, when people in the fracking industry, they need PR support, they just start throwing cash around, and leeches like this guy show up and they say, sure, Center for Industrial Progress, it sounds great. I'll go around with my pet rock and talk about how great for the environment fracking is.
Right, right. You're right. Damaging is a subtle way to put it. I mean, the world would be a better place without people like this. Clearly, all he cares about and all his center cares about is making money, big business, big oil, fracking, you name it. And the idea that somehow we need to clean up the planet because the planet itself is inherently flawed.
Right.
Well,
Nature doesn't
didn't we cause those problems?
Nature doesn't give us a clean environment. We have to clean it up. What? Wait, so nature would have given us the problem of figuring out where to put radioactive waste no matter what. Like if humans just arrived on this planet in the year 2013 without having ever been here before, we'd still be dealing with that. We'd be dealing with the fossil fuel issues and the pollution, Garbage Island out in the Pacific Ocean. Hey, that would have been there no matter what, Lewis. And the whole thing about it's 5,000 feet away from the water supply or whatever it is that he said there. What about the radioactivity of the contaminated water? What about the water being flammable? Are you supposed to be able to light water on fire, Lewis? Is that a normal thing?
You know, I'm pretty sure that's not a normal thing, and I'm pretty sure it's happened in countless places where fracking has started happening.
No question.
Unfortunately, there are some government agencies that back the big business when it comes to fracking.
And and I understand that Alex Epstein is getting paid. You know, he's basically a lobbyist for fracking. But the Fox News guy is basically playing it up and teeing up softballs for him. He says with his concerned face, "But you know, Alex, that some liberals, they're a little concerned about the environmental. I mean, what do you say about that?" And he has like the scowl, like it's a very serious thing to him. Tell me, Alex, you're the expert. What about those liberals? They're concerned. He said, oh no, fracking is actually incredibly good for our environment. It is incredible in the sense that it has no credibility that fracking is incredibly good for the environment. Absolutely damaging and horrific segment on Fox and Friends. Hey, it's Fox News. They call themselves news, you know. Here's an interesting story, Lewis. I want to get your take on it. The other day, I was walking around over the weekend in Brooklyn, and I walked by one of these deli-type restaurants. You know, there's a counter. You go up and order your sandwiches, a couple tables inside. They do delivery. You know the type of place I'm talking about.
Of course. They
have a help wanted sign in the window, and the help wanted sign says, help wanted, cook, delivery guys. So I'm wondering if that's a legal sign. Does that count as a violation of equal employment opportunity rules, which say the law forbids sex-based discrimination when it comes to any aspect of employment, including hiring, firing, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoff, training, fringe benefits, anything else, any other conditions of employment. I found an interviewing and a hiring guide, and it says, inquiry as to the sex of the applicant is permissible only where a bona fide occupational qualification exists and the burden of proof is on the employer. So to me, the fact that delivery women exist is proof that delivery guys looking for men to be delivery guys is not proof of a bona fide occupational qualification. It is illegal to ask the sex of an applicant. It is illegal to ask about sex just because a job is traditionally labeled as men's work. So even if let's say most delivery drivers in Brooklyn, or even all delivery drivers at this particular deli have always been men, that is still not something that opens the door to labeling a job as a job for men and asking about sex. So the question to me, Lewis, is, does the sign in the window constitute a legal job posting that has to meet these legal requirements? Because looking at the law, it seems pretty clear you can't be hiring delivery guys.
It's in reality, yes, but I mean, at the same time, this could have just been a slip of the mind here.
But whether or not it's a slip of the mind, it appears that it's not legal. It's not a legal posting, and that could actually be a discriminatory job posting.
Right. No, definitely, you're right. I mean, maybe whoever made the sign just assumed that no women would want the job. Who knows? But
and that's part of the problem, because that's the mentality that will make it so women don't even apply in the first place, and that's how we get these so-called men's jobs, which don't actually have any bona fide occupational qualification, which would make it a man's job.
Right.
All right. So send me your thoughts on this. Is this illegal? If you're an attorney, could the deli get sued? What could the repercussions be? Very interested to hear what people think about this. You can, of course, leave voicemails anytime, 24 hours a day. The phone number, 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is a voicemail we received. Take a listen to this.
Hey, this is Paul from Michigan. I'm an economist, and I want to say that you guys made a great point yesterday about the farce of so-called free market regulation.
Right.
Where was the free market regulation of Exxon, of BP, of the New England Compounding Center that killed and sickened hundreds of people by allowing, mold in their drugs? Where was the free market regulation of the banks before the crash, or the fertilizer company that blew up the whole town of West Texas and killed about a dozen people? Every time I go by a Mobil or a BP gas station, they're full of cars filling up their tanks. So there's no punishment. There's no punishment at all for their
No
crimes.
question about it. This idea that less regulation will lead to better, more safety and businesses looking after their customers and the environment, it's an absolute farce. It doesn't make any sense at all. Let's take a listen to another voicemail here, Lewis. Why don't we?
Hi, guys. This is James from Canada calling in regards to the name of the Washington Redskins. And
right.
I think it should definitely be changed. It's clearly offensive. As a Native American person, I think that people in the United States are a little behind in general. I mean, in Canada, we don't even call Native people Indians anymore. I know it's common practice in the States to say American Indian or something of that nature, but that's something we got rid of at all levels some time ago. So I think it's pretty clear that it's an offensive name. And
I agree. I think the Washington Redskins name needs to go. And I was surprised, just a couple of blocks from David Pakman Show studios in New York City, there is a museum, and it says it's the Museum of American Indian History. I actually did think that, I use that term when talking about the story because I know that some use it, although I know that calling Native Americans Indians is certainly not proper. I was surprised that there's actually a museum that says the Museum of American Indian History.
That is kind of strange. I mean, American Indian, I assume an American who has Indian heritage, but I guess if you're in, a true American Indian, that was probably the proper term way back when.
Maybe at a certain point it was, absolutely. Keep the voicemails coming. davidpakman.com/fall13 is the membership plus hoodie plus bumper sticker special. It's only going on 3 more days. Sign up. People are loving this thing, Lewis. Hoodies are flying out of here. It's very, very exciting. So take advantage. If you've been waiting to support the show, this is the time. Thanks for watching. See you on the bonus show in a few minutes.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.